Hello, everybody. Welcome to La Rebulucion. I have a special guest today, Rosana Alvarez. I should probably introduce myself. I'm Rebeca Burciaga, faculty member in the Department of Educational Leadership and Chicana and Chicano Studies. And I'm really excited to be doing this series through Centro. But I wanted to prioritize and really begin with highlighting my special guest, who is also my mentor, my spiritual role model, just an amazing artist who really keeps me on my toes, super strong thinker, passionate planner, and somebody who I look to as being able to juggle multiple things and still be incredibly prolific with your art. So welcome, Rosana.
Thank you for that introduction. I always feel like I should hit record and it feels awkward. And I love that it's recorded this time, but sometimes we need reminders, right, of that reciprocity. So I'm happy to be here with whoever comes across this in cyberspace. It's as close to reality as we're going to get for now. And it's very real at the same time. And so I am here with all of my chucherias in the back. Sometimes we say mi raza me respalda, and I say mi chucheria me levanta también. So it's like it's all there in terms of who I am and the spaces I got to float in and out of.
I love it. Thank you. And in particular, I'm especially grateful that you are willing to share multiple pieces of the way that you plan, the way that you do goal setting, the way you meet your aspirations, everything from working full time to momming to podcasting to your art. And I'm looking forward. Thank you so much for being here to share with us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. And I think we said we would start with a quick meditation check-in, right? And I think a lot of us could use some grounding from time to time. And meditation is tricky because we all have that to-do list that's never ending. So it feels like taking a minute here takes a minute from somewhere else. But it also totally helps us be grounded in what our intentions are for our life, right? And so you can close your eyes if you want. I am a weirdo. I meditate with my eyes wide open. Blame it on my trauma or survival skills or whatever you need to do. But we'll start off with 30 seconds and then we'll stretch it to a minute. But I'm going to ask you to humor me in this guided meditation. And if you're sitting, which most of us are, plant your feet firmly on whatever ground you're in. And if you're short like me, you might not reach. So you can scoot up in your chair and plant your feet solidly on the ground. You might be barefooted. That's awesome. If you're not, it's cool. You can feel the ground through your feet. And you're going to take a couple deep breaths. And remember to breathe in as much as you can and hold that breath for a while. And then breathe it out for 4 seconds. You're going to take 2 more deep breaths just like that. And you're going to keep breathing with your feet planted firmly on the ground. And you're going to think about these roots extending outward from the bottom of your feet. And you're going to think about how you got here. And it doesn't even have to be profound. But really think about these roots and visualize them reaching down into the ground, into the dirt, interacting with a bunch of other roots. Thinking about your own roots as a person, as a being. Who did you come from? Where did you come from? And while you're stretched out into those roots and planted firmly on the ground, you're going to think of how you gather strength and how you feel solid in what it is you want for yourself. And even if you feel like you're not always solid in that, right now you're going to picture yourself super firm, hella solid, hella grounded. And you're going to visualize yourself kind of sending some warm energy down into those roots and having this reciprocity of giving life and getting life from who you are and where you come from. And you're going to remember to keep breathing, because some of us have a tendency to hold our breath. And when you're ready, you're going to wiggle your toes, kind of move your fingers around a little bit so you can bring yourself back into where you are in your virtual chair. Did that or you didn't. And either way, it forced you to take a minute while you were figuring out where we were going with this. And if you're ready to open your eyes and be back in the present, I welcome you into this space and really firmly rooted into yourself. And I start some platicas that way because it gets us thinking about what really moves me in my calendaring. And for folks who are kind of here playing along, it might help you figure out, all right, let me disconnect from the intellectual space of how I'm supposed to do things and to really tap into, why am I doing these things, right? Um, as a student, sometimes we suffer by force. You're like means to an end. But a lot of times when I'm able to sit in conversation and community with you, you all let me know you're here for so many people, for so many sacrifices, for so many joys. And that doesn't ever go away, even after you're done with your studies. And so for me, Miss Chronic Busybody, it helps ground me in what matters and what's important and what's okay to let go of in my calendar sometimes, because we can't always be perfect. We can try. It could look perfect from the outside, but once we're in it, it kind of takes its own life. And so when Dr. Burciaga asked me to come and sit in conversation with y'all and share a little bit about what my strategies and stories are for making my life of hustle work. I was like, okay, that's a good time for me to critically reflect on, well, what does work and what doesn't, right? And sometimes I got to look back and think, and I'm a hoarder. I keep a lot of papers that I have no business holding on to, and I can't let them go sometimes because they bring me joy. But I did recently let go of my college planner, and that little sucker had gems of things that were ready to just go become dirt in the earth. So renewal is not a bad thing. Gotta let go. Uh, but the funny thing is, I'm looking at my calendar now and I'm like, well, it doesn't look that different on the surface. It's become digital, it's become electronic and portable. Whereas before, I used to print out a calendar and then fill it out with, color coded highlighters, no sé qué. And that kept me sane. And you would see things on there that were like, here's when you're going to have lunch, here's where you're going to have breakfast. And my calendars aren't that intense in terms of detail right now. But what I will do is share a few things in terms of, well, how is it different and what might work for you? Because at the end of the day, 12 of us can come on here and show you different ways of how we do it. And the beautiful thing is, all 12 of us will have different ways of doing it. And some of you might not find any of those 12 things helpful. And some of you might find one little thing in what we're sharing to be like an aha moment, right? So I'm gonna show you what I do. Sound good? Thumbs up me? All right.
Sounds great.
I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna only show you 1 week, because when I look at my calendar, beyond that, I scare myself and then I over calendar myself. So let's not do that. But what it looks like when I have my whole calendar open for the week, this is this week in particular, is you see color, right? And I am a sucker for color and design. And so I don't have enough colors to reflect all the pockets of my life. So I work with what I can with what's available by Google. And what I like about Google is that it's portable and I can update from my phone. I can park things in there. I can link to my Google Drive in my comments. And it's intuitive, right? So you all probably probably used it and loved how I'm like, and then this is how you use the Google Calendar. I'm just showing you a quick unstable internet glitch out of what this looks like for me this week. And so I start my day punching, I end my day punching, and I know that if I'm punching the clock for 12 hours in between that, is not a good time. I'm not doing right by myself and I got to recalibrate. And there's a lot in there. And I work at multiple campuses, so I have colors for each campus because I'm weird like that, and that works for me visually. And I have, here's things that give me life, my writing. Here's things where it overlaps, and you're like, for real, you just overlap stuff in your calendar. And it's like, yes and no. Sometimes there are things that don't require all of my attention or that entire block of time, but I put them in there so I don't forget. Um, and you'll notice there's a big block of time on Friday where it's like life. I worked a long time to get to an empty Friday. And that doesn't mean I never work on a Friday. It means my Friday is kind of sacred to me in terms of I want to be free to have my Friday look like joy. And I sometimes fail, but I know I keep it open. Other people can totally fill up that block and be like, don't calendar anything in here. For me, visually, I need to see that I'm actually having open space on my calendar. So in undergrad, I would have had every block filled. As a senora on the flip side, I'm like, I want to see open space so that when I sit here, if I don't see open space in my calendar, I know that I'm overdoing it. And I've done that last week, look just like that, right? So it's not perfect, it's progress over perfection. And then for another piece of why that matters is just like a lot of you, you're not just a student or you're not just a professional. You're a lot of things to a lot of people. And for me, the parking lot of all of those things is hosting events. I have efforts and initiatives that I'm leading. I have a shop that I run, a podcast that I produce, books that I got to get out there, magazines, workshops, etc. It is a lot. And so I think one of the things that is helpful to me is knowing that I have, for me, very like different compartments and they overlap by nature of who I am. And so you can even visually see that in how I approach like the designs of all the things. But what I have up on the screen right now is my Instagram page that is the public page. And it doesn't just have me as a mom or me as a professor. It has, here's all the range of things that I produce in the world and create. And in order to do that, people tend to think that artsy folk are hella scatterbrained and disorganized. And it's like, well, in order to pull all this off, there has to be some method beyond just the Google Calendar. And so, in order to pull all this off, there has to be some planning involved, right? And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a bit because I'm like, look at my face when I tell you it all is very much tied to what's my story. And for me, it's that idea of, yeah, let's not just clear space, but claim space for ourselves because everybody needs things from us, right? And you know this, you've got like 5 million assignments. Every person in your life has a different set of expectations. Hey, you've got folks, at home. My mom, I'm a grown woman, and my mom from time to time will still, put things into my non-color coded calendar section of my life to have expectations. My kids will jump in and be like, I have expectations. And so I think for me, it's how do I ground myself, right? Which is kind of how and why we started with where we did. Hey, I see folks popping in here. Super exciting. Welcome. And I want to take a quick pause just to be like, well, let's check in, right? How are you? And really think about like, who are you? Who do you carry? And why is it important for you to get all of your things done? And that's a very individual reflection type thing, right? Where you're like, I could write a whole 20-page paper on that instead of the ones I gotta write. But if anybody in the Zoom room here wants to share, shoot me a little hand raise or a thumbs up, or unmute yourself and just say, I feel compelled to share. This is who I come from. This is what's critical in my life. And I'll give it.
Yeah, hello. I know we dropped in a little later, but I guess we can just check in real quick on if what like was being shared. So then Jasmine and I can like get a recap.
Okay, sure. Yeah, the where we started was a quick grounding meditation, picturing your roots, thinking about where you come from, who you come from. A lot of times, what compels us to keep going on in our little color coded systems of whatever we choose to activate as our strategy is our reason, our mission, right? So, why are we here? What is it that I'm trying to get as an end goal for myself? And for me, I think what isn't that unique, but people tend to think it is that I'm mission driven. And I've always been that way because before being in this space and being in all of the creative spaces that I activate, I was in nonprofits and all of that. Every nonprofit you could think of does amazing work. Some do it better than others, but they all do amazing work. And so the mission to me was always what was compelling. Does it fit with who I am? And you're thinking to yourself, well, how does that fit into my calendar of my everyday, because my hours are fixed? And I'm like, it helps you prioritize. Because I was once an undergrad just like you. And I remember being at a national conference. And this senora was like, I hear a lot of people saying, you don't have time, you don't have time. But what's funny is that we all have the same amount of time. And I was like, dang, burn. No lie. I felt personally attacked in that moment. But I was like, I gotta go home and I'm gonna cry and I'm gonna fix my color coded calendar. And she's right. I only have 24 hours in the day. And, on some of those days, I would have to drive my mom to work like 5 in the morning or whatever. And I can't remember why, but I know I did. Right. Which is why back in those days, I'm going to have breakfast at this time and I'm going to have lunch at this time. But what I was getting at with that is she also said, it's how you prioritize that time. Right. So we always say we don't have time. We have the same amount of time. It's how we prioritize that time. But I think the tricky part for me was figuring out, well, how am I going to prioritize things when everything makes me feel guilty about how I shift the calendar? And everything we learn, especially in our schooling, is you got to produce. You got to produce essays, you got to produce notes, you got to produce an ability to read faster. And it's about outcomes. It really is about outcomes, right? And so I have a choice. I could show you like the parts of me that look sparkly and very productive. But is that fair to you if I'm not showing you the inner workings of, well, there's a big process of negotiation. And I was telling Dr. Burciaga a while ago before we were officially in this session, like, this is the thing. Calendaring is it's like a dance, right? It's an ongoing kind of, you got to revisit it. It's a practice. Everybody talks about things like meditation and yoga as a practice. And I'm like, well, calendaring is a practice and you got to figure out what works for you. And so I say to myself, si por pendeja me caigo, por chingona me levanto, right? Using the words of La Diva Jenny Rivera. And there are weeks where I fail miserably and I trip over myself in my calendar. And I'll be over here all resentful until 9 p.m. on Zoom, telling my husband, no me friegues ahorita because I'm working. And he's like, I'm a truck driver, yo, and you're working till 9? Como que te quebraste. And I'm like, I know, right? Like I messed up. And so the calendar isn't always perfect. This week, I feel good about it. I have room to breathe. There's empty slots in there. Some people do better when they schedule breaks and it says, here's my break. I feel better visually when I can see the breaks. And again, I think fundamentally what I'm saying is you have to know yourself. And that includes your why. It includes figuring out what your mission is. And it includes knowing that everybody's going to throw recommendations to you left and right. And you can spend 5 hours a week trying to become a calendaring expert. But if that's not helping you in your practice, then you got to recalibrate, right? And so I'm going to go back to screen sharing just for a little bit because I keep talking about this mystery mission. And you know, coming from the nonprofit world, the strategic planning session could be like a 2-day session where we spend like, you know, straight 20 hours arguing about mission, vision, and strategy. And to develop a personal mission, it could be that complicated or it could be simple. And so I'm trying to make some tools that keep it simple. And so I'm going to share what works for me. And if you'll humor me for another round here, if you have a notebook, great. If you've got thumbs and it's better on your phone, awesome. Because we're going to think about really quick what our personal mission is. And I know some of you are like, what? How in this one quick session are we going to do that? And I'm like, magic. Trust me, magic. Really, it's about not overthinking it. So let me go back to my Zoom, hit the screen share. Look like every TikTok putting screen share to shame, like if we've never done it, but I promise you we have. All right. And I have two things here if you can see them. And if you can't, just be like, hey, señora, me está fallando, and we'll fix it. But I think if I'm sharing the right things, you can see this little PDF right here that says capable. And on the bottom, it says your 6-word story. Well, we all know 6 is that many, right? And we're stressed out. So I'm like, this ain't even me being silly. This is me being real. 6 words. And I know that some of you are like, I need more words than 6 to capture my mission. And I'm like, maybe, but maybe if we give ourselves permission not to overthink or over articulate, 6 words can read like a poem. And so if you give yourself, let's do 30 seconds just to think, and I'll give you more than 30, but 30 seconds to start, and just be like, all right, with this capable word all up in my face, what is my 6-word story? And in those 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to notice any 6 words that come up. Some of you think in phrases. If it's 6 words, great. If it's 5 words, great. But jot down the first series of words that come to your mind in the next 30 seconds. And if it helps to think about what matters to you, what are you about? If there were only 6 words to capture that, they could be independent in existence. It could be a sentence. It could be a phrase. They could be written as a list. It could be written as a line. You have the freedom to decide. And the end of this more than 30 seconds is not the end all be all. Some of you are panicking and you're like, I have no words. And I'm like, let me give you some. I am hella capable, y'all. Seriously, there's 6, right? You don't need those. I don't need to impose my 6 on you. But you could also be okay in the fact that you might not have your 6 yet. And if you have 6 words and you feel some kind of way about it, great. We're not going to share those quite yet. But I'm going to have you humor me with this other little dorky handout. And this one might help you refine your 6 words, or it might help you start thinking about your 6 words a little bit differently. And some of you are looking at this on the screen and you're thinking, but for real, how does this have anything to do with planning or prioritizing or scheduling? And I'm like, for me, it has everything to do with how I run my life, because my life is my life and I have to live in it and I have to live with it. And I get to make the choices, right? For as much as I'm navigating a whole lot of space where I might not have choice, this is me reclaiming the pockets of my time that I can have control over, and dancing with the little pieces of the puzzle where I might not have that freedom. And so I tend to chart out, like, where am I on my self check? And this comes from the medicine wheel, but I think in boxes. As much as I hate being put into a box, I really visualize things in boxes. And so I think to myself, all right, where are the psychological pieces, the physical pieces, the emotional pieces, the spiritual pieces of my care? Am I taking care of what I need, what I want, right? A lot of times people ask you, what do you need? And I'm like, that's great. But for women in particular, the question of what do you want, a lot of times we're taught to have some element of shame associated with that. And I'm like, why? Right? All of the great feminists of color that we elevate remind us it's good to ask for things. And so we started this plática with being rooted in who carries you and who you carry. Those are parts that I look at, right? And so I know if for me it's about my family, about joy, about things that are more than our survival, then these boxes might help me untease and figure out what all of these boxes should have in them. And then my 6-word story might get refined based off of where I'm at here. And I put this one off to the side because what you want really does kind of have off to the side piece of attention in our lives. But for me, if I take you back to my calendar in a bit, you're going to see like, oh, damn, I really do see this playing out in her everyday wild color coded scheme of boxes. And it really is attached to, well, who am I? What is my mission? And so I'm going to stop the screen share one more time and come back to just the folks here. And I'm not going to put you on blast, put you on the spot, especially because this is being recorded, and be like, tell me what your 6-word story is. You are totally welcome to be like, oh, but I hella want to share, right? That's fine. I'd get excited. But if not, no pressure. You can even put it in the chat if you feel compelled to share. But what I want you to really think about in this moment is, well, do I feel like a little bit more solid in my 6 words? Do I feel like some stuff is clicking into place in terms of where I am with my own stress levels? Because at the end of the day, no color coded calendar is worth your whole life, right? Because we talk about health as a thing you should take care of, but you still got to navigate the rest. And for me, it's I come from who I come from, and that means I've inherited all kinds of health issues. And I could, work myself to a bone punching twice a day for the entire pandemic, which I have, right? And I'm like, and I'm still gonna be a thick senora, and I'm okay with that. But also, I do it because it's prioritizing not just my physical health, but my emotional, spiritual well being, right? And so it's like, if I have all those boxes, then it's harder for me to fall into the traps of absorbing all of the shoulds, because everybody's always going to tell us what we should be doing with our time. And y'all are masters of your own little Tetris. And that's probably why I think in boxes, because I grew up with like Nintendo and all of that. And Tetris was like my jam. And I see it in how I schedule. But if you want to throw down your 6-word story, I'm happy to hear it. If not, that's for you, right? It's not about my approval, it's for you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I honestly could relate to even like almost everything, if not everything that you shared, especially I think right now as I kind of navigate this, like, well, personally, I feel like I definitely feel that guilt sometimes when it comes to like calendaring, where I've tried to like fill my day with as much as I can get done possible. And sometimes when I don't, I felt this sense of like discouragement, or like, oh dang, I didn't get to do all of the things that I wanted to do. And then that's like pushed me to reanalyze. So that's where I really felt that the calendaring is a practice, and it's like something you have to go back to a lot, because we have like this fixed mentality. However, it needs to calendaring is flexible. Like it's I feel like sometimes my approach before has been very much like, oh, calendaring definitely like to produce, to do as much as I can. And I realized that it wasn't like always favoring me. And so I had to go back to it and then definitely a practice of like having to adjust, to see what worked best for me. So my 6 words, when we were doing the capable, were love, freedom, empower, flow, health, and support. And when I was writing these down, so many other words came up. So I made like little like flechitas for additional words. But those were the ones that came up uh, first while we were doing the first activity. And yeah, I think the second, the self-centered and self-care, I think that one definitely um, it requires me a little bit more like reflection. But I definitely felt that sometimes we don't the what you need, we put it on the side most of the time. And sometimes we do think of like uh things for like to do for others, whether it's for like your professor or like your supervisor or like your friend or your peer. And sometimes we put ourselves last. And so I definitely could feel that sometimes we put what we need on the side instead of putting it like at the forefront. So yeah, I just wanted to share that, but I know I went
Thank you.
on other like tangents, but thank you.
Yeah, see, and some folks can find those like 6 floating words, and to you, they mean something much more than those 6 words. So those arrows are always going to have spin-offs. For me, when I first came across this little activity, it was in the context of trying to figure out how to articulate myself as an artist. The struggle I have with that is I'm never not just one thing, right? Like I'm always simultaneously, and we see it more with the pandemic now because we don't have our place to compartmentalize. And so like we're all the things, right? You're a daughter, and for me, I'm a mom, I'm a trucker's wife. That matters for a lot of reasons. I'm a writer, I'm an artist, and I teach. And I also am just abundantly creatively producing things because that's where I find my joy. And I'm lucky enough to have come across mentors who remind me that there are strategies to do that in alignment with who you are. And so you're at a critical space where you're formed, but you're still in formation. And all of us are, even me as like the senora that is post, grad and teaching, I'm always in formation in terms of there are things that are continually going to come into this fabric of who I am, and I'm going to weave in all these different strands, and the trenza is going to start to look, fuller and different, and it's going to start looking more colorful for me. And I know that. And so it's like, for me, it's like not re-envisioning myself, but really aligning myself. And for you as a student, I think of office hours this morning. I had a student say to me, this paper is going to be a little bit late. And I'm like, okay, not a big deal. We're in a pandemic. I'm not tripping. But the conversation wasn't so much of that in itself, but that the after part was, she said, I come from a family where my mom said, tienes que cumplir. And I'm like, oh, she activated a whole lot of writing I want to do later on that, because I grew up with that. Tienes que cumplir. And so for me, it was always like, well, I committed to this, so tengo que cumplir. And every box became cosas que tengo que cumplir. It has to get done. And there are some things that we have absorbed about how rigid that expectation is. But then I think to myself, back to that little strategy mapping sheet of my own vision and mission for my life. And I'm like, yeah, tengo que cumplir, pero no me tengo que matar, right? And that's different, because in order to cumplir, I have to be alive. And in order to really be alive, I got to be living, not just, have a heart that's pumping and a body that's ticking. And so for me, it's, if I can trick myself into thinking que tengo que cumplir, then if I can put up enough into my strategy of things that bring me joy that are kind of tied to other people, my brain thinks I'm doing this porque tengo que cumplir, not because it brings me joy. And so I know that seems like, dang, self-manipulation 101, but I'm like, man, by any means necessary sometimes. And so in that little chart, you'll see who are you and who do you carry. And if I'm constantly having that dorky hand out in my face and saying, okay, I have to take care of these 4 pieces of my health, spiritual, mental, physical, emotional, because because of these people and their sacrifices, then it's a responsibility to those 7 generations back with the people I came from. And then it's also a responsibility of my kids who are very much in my face. And it's not just about my kids, but that collective next generation, right? And so all of those things and why I do them suddenly become bound to all of those people in my own rationale, that it's no longer about ticking things off of my box or adding more pressure to doing things that don't serve me. It's about recalibrating and reprioritizing, right? What's not working for my life? Because if I am not doing the things that I need to get done, because things will get done, trust. But from this space of productivity, for me, it kind of brings out this element of resistance. And at my best, if I'm taking care of myself, I become magically mad productive toward all those things that need to get done, whether I like them or not. And so, again, I'm going to go to the screen share really quick because it's like, well, there are a lot of things in this list of things that I am now responsible for producing, that all of these things could be their own life of task lists and individual calendars, right? And that could be a lot. Like, I know some people see this and they're like, are you serious? Like, when do you rest? And I'm like, I watch a lot of Netflix, and for me, that's rest. I've read 8 books for fun, and it's only March. That's not me every year. That's not me all the time. That's me at my best. And for me to be at my best, I really have to be grounded in what is the calendar doing for me with my own system? What do I need to revisit? And so it really becomes this idea of, well, everything I do has to align with my mission where I have choice. And if it doesn't, then I need to recalibrate. And so when you look at my calendar, there are some things that are negotiable and can be moved. And for me, what I find in terms of scheduling time, because a lot of that is also fluid, right? Like, I have a class from this time to this time. My calendar has looked like that, just like yours has. Right now, we're in this asynchronous setup. As for myself, I teach asynchronous. So I don't have to be in class here, here, and here, like in my normal calendar. For me, what's working during this pandemic is this system that's kind of a time block system. And you can Google it, and there's all kinds of fancy tools and apps, no sé qué. But for me, I'm like, oh yeah, I just gotta use my Google Calendar because it's free and convenient and portable. Not that I'm, a commercial for them by any means, but that I know, okay, there's this huge chunk of time, 11:30 to 4:30, grading. I'm still gonna have lunch in that time. I'm still gonna take cheese breaks in that time. I don't have to schedule those because I know that for me and my body, my back will tell me when it's time to take a break when I forget. Other people might need to put, take a break, Mensa, whatever you gotta do. But these blocks of time are also kind of like a timer. Because what happens to me is if I say, okay, work on grading 74 here, work on grading 160 here, work on grading 75 papers, or if I make it task based, for me, I stop being productive because then I'm just like, well, I said I was gonna grade in this category, and so I guess I have to sit here for 7 hours because I said I was gonna do them all. That's not sustainable. So for me, in my body and my person and my brain and my spirit, and for my emotions, quite frankly, I'm like, all right, those hours, I'm gonna get done what I'm gonna get done, pero voy a estar en chinga for that time. Because if it doesn't get done, that doesn't mean, okay, I'm gonna spend another 2 hours because I didn't finish right now. That means put your pencil down, it's done for right now. And if that was like out of my mind, totally misgauge that, then I know for the next calendaring session I have with myself, I'm going to add in more time because clearly I needed more time. But that way I'm not kind of perpetuating a cycle of overworking myself. It's more like, and we do this, right? Like, I'm going to work on that paper starting here. And then you're like, but I still have 3 more days. So then you kind of don't really like, you're kind of doing it, but you're not doing it. So for me, knowing myself is critical to this process of like, well, okay, I said it's on there, it's on my calendar, I'm in it hard to win it, because that's it. I'm not going to put in more time. And then sometimes, if you do, because your students and your grade is very much assessed by someone else, then you already know. All right, te caíste. What are you going to do differently next time? Right? Because now you have less free time, or now you're going to miss that workout, or, a Zoom session with a fabulous mentor, no sé. So, strategy, tools, worksheets, you can find them, you can make them, but centering yourself in that. And if it helps to think about it as centering yourself in responsibility in relation to other people, then great. Use the strategy that's going to trick your mind into something more than just productivity, because productivity for productivity's sake, collectively, we've seen it's harmful. We've seen the effects of it in this pandemic. And for me, because I know myself, I did my dorky strengths finder assessment, and one of my dominant traits is ideation. So I love getting caught up in this vision process of figuring out, how do ideas come into being. And so I am in kind of what other people would think la la land, and I'm like, it's a strategy land is what it is. And so I'm constantly parking things, and I use Google as my primary tool because it's portable, it's backed up for as far as it's been in existence. I can be on it on my phone. If I open up my iPad, I'm synced to it. If I'm on my computer, I'm synced to it. So my whole workflow is the spreadsheets, the calendar, and then I park all of my files there, because a lot of times in regular times, I'm visiting different people as parts of my work. And that's the best, most seamless way to make that workflow manageable without having to figure out if my USB drive is going to fail, or if it's going to be compatible to whatever thing is there. It's there in the cloud and accessible. And if I feel so moved to write for 20 minutes in uncalendared time while I'm waiting in line, for toilet paper at pandemic shopping time, then I have 20 minutes and I know I can type with my thumb. So for me, it works. And I think the key takeaway here is ground yourself and know yourself, and figure out how to make your calendar work for your life, and not make your calendar a tool of you working for life, because that's different.
Thank you so much. That was honestly so empowering, especially with the overall message of planning with purpose, and definitely, centering oneself, and finding ways in which you can do that and also align with your other missions. So thank you so much, Rosana. I took a lot of notes, but I'm definitely going to visit your website. I remember looking at it a while ago when we were trying to plan the Latinas in Leadership panel, and I realized that you had a podcast, you had your own business going on. So it's truly wow to see that I'm now in a conversation with you. But thank you so much for making the time. I know that Yasmin and I have to log off right now, but I truly appreciate Dr. Burciaga for also putting this together and for just sharing this space. I know, hi Luana, I know we didn't get to speak up a lot, but it was great to be in this space with y'all.
Thank you
for joining.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I also learned a lot from coming here today. I also took a lot of notes, and I also keep a planner where I can write down all my assignments and then what you do on Google Calendar. And I find it really helpful, but I did also learn a lot of things that I hope that I can apply to make my general life better and work better for me and my schedule.
Nice.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Yeah.
Take care. Yeah.
too. There was a practical tip that came by way of their comments just now, and that's that in the Google Calendar, if you're working in Google Drive for, say, your papers, because I do that all the time, I will link to the document that I'm working on into the calendar, and then it's all there, right? And so I'm not like, where did I save it? Where did I put it? And that's new. Like that for me is a newly incorporated strategy, because I realized that I was having drafts of workshops I was putting together. I was having like little copy for the magazine parked somewhere else in somebody else's Google Drive. And so having that little link that I can just park in my calendar, I'm like, well, here it is. And I don't have to waste time figuring out where I was parking things, right? Because for me, it's a lot of different workflows that come together. And that's how I keep it like, all right, let's not be messing around with systems. Let me just make it as efficient as I can in the ways that I access it.
That's brilliant. I didn't even think about that. And I'm just thinking how many times I'm like, can you send me the link again? I'm wondering, Luana, do you have any questions or anything? I know we only have about 5 minutes left, but I wanted to make sure if you had any questions and anything you wanted to share.
No questions. I just really enjoyed listening and learning from this, so I'm good right now. Thank you.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I think one of the biggest lessons, even though I really like calendaring, I don't think I've ever done it with such bigger intention, right? Like, so I know I want to stay healthy. I know I want to get my work done, but I hadn't done it in this sort of larger purpose of who I am, who I carry, and in particular, just the different buckets that you were talking about, being mindful. So I'm super grateful about that reminder. In fact, I just wrote down that I would like to spend some of my Sunday trying to figure that out. And so that worksheet that you developed, do you have that on your website or no?
You know what? You're not the first one to ask. I have it. Usually I share it by way of a Google Drive, but I will. That's a great idea. I will go ahead and add on the Rosana Alvarez website.
Okay.
I'm gonna link freebies, and it'll be there. Because I do like offering things like that that are helpful. And for as much as I offer to my students in my courses, for other reasons that are overlapping, that's something I'm willing to do. So I'll park it there.
That'd be great. Yeah. And I think also just showcase, you could do these workshops more often. I think this would be amazing if you did something.
Well, I know we're almost out of time, but you had brought up a question that I think became kind of the underlying current for how I was like, well, what can I share today, right? That I feel adds value, and not just another kind of tool. And it was, what did you do as a kid, and how can you get back to doing this in the future? And for me, I'm like, well, it was interesting to see that you threw that question out there, because I'm like, well, that kind of is the undercurrent, right, of how I do what I do and why. And I came across this reading a couple weeks ago, and Resma Mannequin talks about somatic abolitionism, and that's a whole other conversation, but a lot of gems there. And then I got to figure out who the originator of this is. But he said, a lot of times we say we're getting tools for the toolkit. Well, a toolkit implies that those tools are going to fix something, which is fine. But then he said, what if we thought about it as a toy box? And I was like, what? Ah, cabron? Yes. And he's like, and there might be tools in that toy box. You might even, whatever. But that you're going to kind of bring this out in a, it feels different to take things out of a toy box of sorts. And you're grown, and you're supposed to be, put together and polished and professional. And somehow we associate that with losing joy and losing that, twinkle that you might have had as things that brought you joy as a kid. But when I talk to grown folk that are like struggling to find time, they'll be like, I really love playing tag. What did you like about playing tag? I love that I could run and I felt so free. And it's like, whoa, have you thought about running now to bring you joy? And everybody's like, dang, no. Or like, I thought about it. I flirted with it, but I didn't do it. And I've done that, right? And so now it's like, how can I, and I don't want to call those excuses. I think it's more complicated than that. But for me, I do say, well, how can I take away excuse, how can I address the excuses or the hesitations, right? How can I address the doubt over doing that in my life? And so you'll notice around me, it's like, well, I have my markers and I say, I need to draw more. Well, now it's like, mira pendeja, you have them right there. Go ahead and use them, right? And if I don't, then at least I know I took that barrier away from myself. I have my freaking native flute right here, straight up. So I can be like, oh, I wish I had more time. And now I'm like, I'm waiting 5 minutes to log into this meeting. 5 minutes is 5 minutes. So like dorky things like with how we structure not just our calendar but our lives, right? And our calendar becomes our kind of agenda for our life. So I did want to put that out there, since the other two in their comments were like, yes, this idea of play.
Yeah, and put things in your life purposefully and around you purposefully so that you take them up as you make space.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I'm so grateful, and thank you, Luana. It was great to have you as a guest as well, or synchronously, right? For the people who watch us asynchronously. But thank you for those of you at home, those of you watching at home. We will be back. Check the calendar for our next session. And thank you so much, Rosana Alvarez, for gracing us. We'll link your website in the, it'll become a YouTube clip, so we'll link that as well. All right. Thank you.